All right, everybody. So I'm going to sing about military bands, and no, not really. I normally speak very off the cuff, but because I'm supposed to be time limited, I might read quite a lot today. The French military strikes I'm going to talk about a little bit. Some of you may have heard of, and some of you may never have heard of, the fact that actually the soldiers went on strike. Large numbers of soldiers went on strike from April till June 1917. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to sing a little bit as well. Some of you might, if you've seen the film Oh What a Lovely War, you might remember, and certainly when I saw it on the stage, the French soldiers, all they do is walk on singing this song. Adieu la vie, adieu l'amour, adieu toutes les femmes. They then lie down and die. Because that's pretty much what was happening, not only to the French. Gosh, which is the one I click? If I click the right one. Which one do I click? Sorry, there's too many buttons. Generation A, I think, or C or something. No, nothing's happening. All right. La, la, la. I can press the button. It's jammed. I'll keep talking. It's okay. So the song, which, is quite long, it was written to a very popular waltz tune of the day. The French do that quite often. Very gentle tone, but really pretty vicious words. Oh, it's working now. And they were writing about how awful it was in the trenches, how boring and tedious it was as well. And that's the song I was singing. So, adieu la vie, adieu l'amour, adieu toutes les femmes. Those of you who don't speak French. C'est bien fini, c'est pour toujours de cette guerre infâme. C'est à crayon sur le plateau qu'on doit laisser sa peau. Car nous sommes tous condamnés, nous sommes les sacrifiés. Now the reason I sang it was later on, the angry verse, or the angry chorus, I'd like you all to join in. That's the tune, so I expect you've got it absolutely imprinted on your brain. So as I say, the song's about the drudgery of the trenches. Soldiers are fed up, they're exhausted, and even in their rest days bring very little respite, because they often are given extra tasks to do behind the lines. And while they're waiting for relief, the song says they see the people, the next lot, coming through the rain, through the fog, coming to find their own graves, because that's how it feels. The second verse talks about the rich bastards sitting in the Grand Bavard, enjoying themselves, and they have this lovely, rather laconic line, which most of you will understand, even if you don't speak French. Si pour eux la vie est rose, pour nous c'est pas la même chose. So, life might be nice and rosy for those rich people who sent us to the war in the first place. It's not like that for us. And what they're really saying is, instead of hiding away, it would be much better if they went in the trenches themselves. After all, it's poor people who are mostly sent to the front, and we're losing everything. We're losing our lives, our friends, in the defence of people who have it all. The last verse, which is even angrier and less waltzy, they're basically saying it really is enough, it's your turn. For all of you who want the war, to pay with your own bodies. Car si vous voulez la guerre, if you want the war, payez-la de votre peau. Pay with your own skin, literally. Now this song, no one's ever found out who wrote it. The song spread like wildfire throughout the trenches. And the generals, as you can imagine, were less than pleased. They wanted to find the author of these words. And indeed, there might have been many authors, nobody knows. They offered rewards, including an honourable discharge, being sent home and safe for reporting the culprit. Rumour has it they even offered £1 million francs reward, but in a sort of reverse I am Spartacus, nobody gave up the culprits. Now, I don't know about you, but I learned quite a bit. In fact, my O-level history, O-level, shows how old I am. My O-level history stopped at the First World War, actually the causes of the First World War. So I never even got to 1917. And I don't know if anybody knew about this. And what you may remember from 1917, of course, there were a couple of revolutions in another place, Russia, I believe. And of course, this was part of the fear, because when the soldiers went on strike from this sort of horror and that sort of tedium, they didn't go off singing La Marseillaise, they went off singing the Internationale, another French song, by the way, originally. I won't sing that one, though I do know the first verse in French. So they were really, really terrified, and the ruling classes across Europe were absolutely terrified. But word didn't get out that much. So, quite possibly influenced by the February Revolution in Russia, some of them went on strike. There was a particularly terrible offensive which failed dismally, and many, thousands and thousands of French lives were lost for absolutely nothing. It started off, 17 men abandoned their posts, and they were in the face of the enemy, and 12 of those were sentenced to death, although actually they were all reprieved, I understand. So, as I say, it wasn't just the terrible fighting and the deaths, but also these terrible conditions that they lived in. And another problem for the soldiers was that they didn't know what was going on. No one was really telling them. And so, of course, they fell prey to rumours, and sometimes with very dreadful consequences. For example, 2 rumours seem to have been particularly the cause of some anger. One was a rumour that this general had ordered that every 10th man in 2 battalions was going to be shot as punishment for refusing to obey orders when they were ordered to go back to the front line. And 3 of the mutineers were sentenced to death, and 1 of them was executed. Then there was another rumour that the women and children in Paris were being attacked and abused by rioters in the city, while their menfolk were stuck at the front, engaged in totally pointless attacks on the Germans. And actually, there was some basis of truth in that rumour, but the magnitude of it had been exaggerated in the telling, as you can imagine. So this really was a non-violent protest against the conditions. I've got lots of pictures of terrible conditions. We can keep going. This is the rat catchers. This is just a few rats that they caught. Yes, as far forward as June 1917, 300 men met from the 74th Regiment, and they passed a resolution that we shall not move back to the trenches. And they decided to march to the nearest village to rally support, that their way was barred by their officers. So they didn't want to have a fight with their officers, and they just sat down in the road and refused to move. Tactics that are familiar to some people I can think of sitting in the audience, Ben. Just don't move. And they made the point that they got nothing against the individual officers. That wasn't the point, but they absolutely were not going back to the front. So as I said, the mutinies occurred throughout France, throughout the army, from about April 17th to the end of June of that year. And there were about 250 instances of mutiny, and there were 112 divisions, French divisions, and 68 of them were affected to some extent. I've got some ideas about how much. And as I said, senior French commanders were extremely worried. You can imagine, their soldiers aren't going to fight. It doesn't make life very easy for their generals. And of course, some did equate it to what happened in Russia, and they were very, very worried that such a situation might happen there. And a great cause of concern was that most of the problems were actually with those people in reserve, i.e. the ones that were ready to go and relieve the front. So I guess it's that sense of when you're in the terrible situation, you can probably just about put up with it, but when you come away and then you think you're going to face it again, it's probably almost worse than being in it, when you know how bad it is. And of course the other panic was that the Germans would find out and take advantage. And in fact, the Germans didn't find out until very, very close to the end. But they also wanted to keep it quiet because, my goodness, their soldiers might go on strike as well. So everyone had a reason to hush up. And of course the workers in Germany, many workers back in Germany were striking themselves. And in fact the action had some success. So by mid-May, so quite early on in the strike, this horrendous General Nivelle, who had been a disastrous leader and caused these terrible situations, terrible deaths, had actually been forced to resign, and he was replaced. For those of you who know your history, he was replaced as commander for the area by Pétain. Yes, the same Pétain who led the Vichy regime some years later. So we'll leave that aside. That's definitely another talk, not by me, for another day. But actually he seemed to do some quite good things in terms of actually addressing the grievances of the strikers. And he actually said, well, until the time was right, whatever that means, he ordered that the French army should take no further part in offences. And he ordered that leave was to be granted, because leave was often cancelled, so that they were actually going to have leave, and at the end of every 4 months. And actually that when they were on rest periods, that they should be resting and not be giving extra tasks. So that actually made quite a difference, and they did go back. I've given you some of those figures. But there were prosecutions. There were consequences for a number of women. It's unclear how many were involved. Possibly about 35,000, 40,000, which actually out of a huge army is probably quite small, but the impact obviously was huge. And 1,381, according to this researcher, were given heavy prison sentences, which meant 5 years or more hard labour. It's really heavy stuff. And 23 men were given life sentences for their participation, and another 1,500 or so were given lesser prison sentences. 55 men probably were executed. That's a little bit of history of the actual strikes, the military strikes. Sorry, before I go on, just a few more horrors of the trenches. That's without the rain. I found a colour picture. I was very impressed with this. So, I'll go back a bit. Back to the song, or the songs. The interesting thing is, obviously, not only were the generals terrified, and not just the generals, I'm sure the government, not only terrified about the mutiny, but they were actually terrified about the song. As I said, they tried very, very hard to find out who'd written it so that they could punish that person. But the song was officially banned in France until 1974. That's nearly 60 years later. I don't know, perhaps I will speculate that perhaps the reason it was banned was because it wasn't a pacifist song criticising, just a general anti-war song. It really laid into the rich people who just tossed their lives away and continued to profit. A little aside, which is actually nothing to do with France, but I love this story, much as it makes me angry. This is about Britain and Germany. So if you think about that time, where were the best lenses in the entire world made? It would almost certainly be the Zeiss company in Germany. And there were times when the British Army needed to have these wonderful lenses, and they couldn't get them because, of course, they weren't trading with Germany. And who had access to all the rubber plantations to make tyres and so on that were obviously necessary for the bikes, motorbikes and cars? Britain was very heavily into its colonies at the time. So, how are they going to be able to carry on the war with no lenses on the British side and no rubber on the German side? Not possible to carry on the war. Oh, the war could have stopped. No, we'll go to Switzerland and we'll do the deals in the neutral countries and we'll carry on. Nothing to do with strikes, but I think it indicates how people will carry on profiting from anything they can profit from, even if there's murder going on. So that's one song. Now, in 1967, a song was written to commemorate this event. It's called the Mutineers of 1917. To me, it's a very heartbreaking song because it starts off, I'll do a little sing, it starts off, Vous n'êtes pas un monument no more. Basically, you're not on the war memorials. you're missing, if you know, obviously, like just to say all the villages here, that every village has got a war memorial, and the same thing, you see whole lists of family, the same name. But the people who were killed for striking, people who were killed for cowardice, whatever, did not appear on the war memorials. Now, a few years ago in Britain, there was some victory and there was recognition of those killed for example. So, like cowardice, which would now be recognised as shell shock or post or even during trauma, stress disorder. But that fight is still carrying on in France, and I have a couple of times sung at war memorials, a couple of times on Armistice Day, and there's an organisation called the Free Thinkers in France, and they are campaigning very, very hard, and they do make that campaign on Armistice Day, particularly. But anyway, the song that was written, going back to that, trying not to read too religiously, the song, The Mutineers of 1917, that was banned, written in 1967, banned until 1988. Okay? And another song, French, The Power of Song, which is that's the point of the title. There was a song called Le Deserter by a guy called Boris Vian, an amazing, amazing person, philosopher, musician, singer, songwriter, etc. Look him up, V-I-A-N, absolutely wonderful songs that he's written. And again, using this very gentle approach, he just said, you know, you're calling me up to the army, but, you know, I'm not going to go. All my life I've seen my brothers, my father's dead, my brothers have gone off to fight, my mother's suffered so much that she's in a grave, etc., etc. And that song was banned for the duration, at least, of the Indochina War. So songs are very, very terrifying. There are others. So for me, it's a source of pride to have sung anti-war songs in France on several occasions, including at the main monument in Verdun in 2014. This was long after the official celebration. I don't want to interfere with that, but just make the point that there's a noble tradition in France and elsewhere of opposing the war and opposing the capitalist profiteering. This is a little bit from the Deserter, and it has this same line, same sentiment as the middle bit. You know, if blood must be given, go give your own. You're a good apostle, whatever that means. So you should, you know. And it's very angry. And interestingly, this last bit, this is the later version to make it more pacifist. And Boris Vian was a pacifist, but the original version said, "If you do go after me, warn your police that I have got a gun and I will shoot." But they changed it for reasons we can understand. Huh? Okay. So I'm nearly finished. Sorry, I should have done this more in order. This is the monument I said about the. In Britain, we have some success of recognition of those who were killed, for example, who were probably just frightened, shell-shocked and traumatised. And this is at the National Arboretum, and this is the memorial to that. And this is in France. This is an anti-war memorial. I can't read it, but basically, really, take care, don't go to war, really. And this is actually quite near where I used to go every year, singing with 150 or more other lefty, mostly French people. And it's apparently you can tell the war memorials if they were sort of left-wing or right-wing, because the right-wing people always have soldiers, the right-wing villages of the time, and the more left-wing villages have the statues of Marianne, the symbol of the female symbol of France. I don't know if that's true, but it's quite nice. That's the beginning, as I was saying, of this other song, which I think the words are very, we can't ever tell your grandchildren about how your grandpas died, and we don't talk about it. Right, you ready to sing?
Yes.
In French, everybody, because it doesn't work. Okay, yes. So the tune is la da 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 da. Okay, you all got it. Okay. Are you going to be angry? Angry. Shall I do it once and then you sing it? Okay. Ce quand le pognon se leur met en train, car c'est pour eux car si vous voulez faire la guerre, payez-la votre peau. Now see, I've sung it loads of times and I made a mistake, so you have permission to get it wrong. Ready? 1, 2,